Welcome to another episode of Steady Lads. I'm Jordi, the CIO of Solana Capital. We have today with us a special guest, but let's kick off with a quick intro to Justin, the CEO of Astaria. We have Taiki, the humble farmer who has recently been a RWA degen. And we have Austin Federa, who has graciously come to discuss all kinds of interesting topics around not just Solana, but the broader economic systems of what crypto is building. So welcome, Austin.
Thanks for having me.
I guess to preface, there's been some Twitter background here, and it's kind of what got your attention and managed to get you on here. So that's good. I think we can maybe put up a little back and forth that we've been having, mainly around this concept of a token being like a monetary product and not being as like a stock in essence, like a discounted cash flow. This is something that, for how much money, depends on the right answer to this question. There is like not nowhere near enough discussion or understanding of this topic. And so recently, I kind of put forward some points around ethically, around distribution for monetary premium products. And um, I'm fascinated with some of your responses around, you actually don't think none of the cryptos, not just Sol, are money, but we'll get into that. And I think this is gonna make a fascinating episode. But maybe just for context, first of all, you can kind of tell us, like, what is your role with Solana, and kind of like how long you've been doing that.
Yeah, so I currently work for the Solana Foundation, where I'm the head of strategy. I joined the Solana ecosystem in January of 2021. Before that, I was with Bison Trails up until their acquisition by Coinbase. And I initially joined Solana Labs kind of working on product and product marketing, and sort of had a bit of a chief of staff role at Solana Labs. And then in spring of 2022, I moved over to the Solana Foundation side of things.
Nice. So you've
Yeah.
seen all kinds of different sides of what's going on, and I'm sure things change. At the beginning,
Oh, yeah.
SBF was like a cheerleader, and I know he was not as involved later on when things were actually getting built. But there was the infamous, sell me all your Sol at $3 tweet, which I have to admit, like, that was probably when I first bought Solana. I don't know about Justin or Taiki, but I'm like, well, this guy's backstopping it at $3. I bought it at $2. This seems like a good trade. Did you guys buy in at that time?
I actually didn't. I was on the sidelines. I was kind of an EVM maxi at the time, and I think EVM still has significant moats. And like one question I had for Austin is, recently I was looking into the Solana ecosystem. I got on a call with the Hubble team, like they're
Yeah.
building Hubble, like USDH, Camino Finance, and whatnot. And I posed the question of, like, why are all these tokens so illiquid? Because at least on EVM, there are market makers, whether it be retail or institutional. But for Solana coins, the liquidity is under 1 million for most of them. Do you think, like, are there systemic, or are there like structural reasons for that? Because it makes it really, really hard for me to participate in the Solana ecosystem.
I think there are, and the most basic answer is the average Ethereum user is much richer than the average Solana user. The token has had a much longer time to appreciate. There's been a lot of people who got in at Ethereum when it was $80 and it's 2,000 today. And so there's just more free flowing cash in the Ethereum ecosystem than there is in the Solana ecosystem. And I think it's like, it's important to recognize that no one is an LP in Uniswap for basically any good reason, right? There's no economic incentive to participate in those pools besides you're A16Z and you hold a bunch of Uni tokens and you want to make sure their market share is maintained, right? And so there's a lot of systemic relationships that you see on Ethereum that are great, and it's not to knock any of that stuff, but I think what you've seen is that on Solana, that part of the ecosystem is still maturing because the firms that have high conviction on Sol, some of them are regulatorily boxed out from market making and those sorts of things. And then I think, very reasonably, a lot of people who were not deep in the Solana ecosystem felt some insecurity and some doubt about whether Solana was going to make it through the collapse of FTX. And I don't fault anyone for that. I think what happened with the collapse of FTX and sort of the perception that they were really closely involved with the Solana ecosystem would have killed almost any other blockchain out there. I think it's like Ethereum and Bitcoin are probably the only two that could have gotten through something like that. So I don't fault people for being a little gun shy of the ecosystem. But what we've seen over just the last few months is like folks who have not been paying attention to the Solana ecosystem are starting to pay attention to the Solana ecosystem again. And it's really awesome to see, but I think we'll probably see institutional capital follow a lot of that excitement and attention. But I
Yeah,
agree with
and
you. It's a problem today in the Solana ecosystem that especially some of the smaller market cap tokens, especially some of the sort of very Solana native projects, there is not as much liquidity available. Now, what I will say is that things like Jupiter Aggregator are incredibly capital efficient. They're about 7 to 10 times more capital efficient than DeFi and other chains, which means they can handle a lot more small orders. But obviously, if you're talking about big orders, liquidity is liquidity.
Justin, how about you? When did you first kind of start looking at the Solana ecosystem, or at least be curious and investigate it?
Yeah, a lot of people don't know this about me, but I'm a very big Solana fan actually. So I've got my Solana phone right here. It's not my daily phone; that's an iPhone. But I love Solana because they're willing to try stuff like that. I mean, I, I think that's just absolutely brilliant to build like a seed vault into your phone to secure your private key. And I think more projects should be trying these like big bold experiments, which I absolutely love. Sadly, though, I've always sort of or mid curved it, and I've never owned a considerable amount of Solana, and so I'm certainly coping now as it's done so well. So congrats to the community there. But no, I sort of missed out. I missed the $2 call, Jordi. You didn't text me to buy Solana at $2 before SBF's tweet, so I missed that. And then
You almost had
I
another
just
opportunity.
I just keep fumbling the bag, I guess. Yeah. It was a scary time. It was.
I I, I will admit that I was relatively new to crypto at the time when this whole FTX thing was happening, and the person who alerted me to buy Solana will surprise people. It was actually Suzu. He was just like, "Hey, this SPF guy, he's gonna backstop this. Like, you should just go max long." Um, so good trade. I got in at $2. I put in what I thought was a good chunk. I put in like a six-figure amount, and I sold it at $6. I was a TradFi guy. I thought like a 3x. I thought like 3x is like incredible. I'm like, wow, made hundreds of thousands of dollars on this, and I didn't even have to do anything, and it moved in like so fast. It was like within like a month or something, right? Like it kind of exploded after that. Because like from a trader standpoint, from a risk reward, it's all about risk reward when you're putting a trade on. Once like the risk is kind of, you could say that maybe SPF wasn't fully legitimate now that we know, but at the time he looked like to be like, this high flying billionaire. And if he's saying I'm backstopping at $3, then the price discovery has to happen above it. And so once that sets in, it's just such a great trade because it's only upside. It's asymmetric. So that was my first foray. I watched it skyrocket from 6 to 50 over the next months. FOMOed the hell out of it because I was quite a big fan at the time. Um, and then there was a dip to $20. It went from 50 to 20. So this was probably going to be sometime in 21. Sorry, yeah, mid 21 maybe. And so I'll admit, like the most money I've made in my life, I think it's kind of close between like a very large treasury kind of macro trade I'd done at some point, and I bought a huge chunk of Solana at $20. I wrote it up all the way. I mean, I went to breakpoint in 21 with a big bag. I didn't sell any. I had just staked it. It ended up becoming like half of my net worth or something. It was like a ridiculous bag. I thought I'm like hot shit. I show up, I own like, many, many bips of like the total supply going around. And I just remember this one moment being in a car going to like this, like they're having these crazy parties, Delphi, and like everybody was like, blinging out and mansions. And somebody brought up on Twitter, there was this Chamath thing where he's talking about how, he's gotten billions of it, makes my bag selling look very small at a discount. And he's like, oh, I'm holding it ish. And then they're all kind of like laughing. All these like David's, this is your crew, Justin. The All In crew is kind of like And I would say that that kind of lit a light bulb in my head, and I'm like, oh shit, like this is a bit of a 3-3 going on here. Um, and that morning, once I slept on it, I sold everything, and it was a huge trade. It made a lot of difference to my. So I'm not like, first of all, I like Solana. I'm not bitter in any way. It's done very well for me. But that moment is something I want to discuss with you, Austin, because it kind of brought the forefront of like, distribution and the potential for certain players to have a lot of power over a community. So, um, any thoughts on as a preamble?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not really sure that Ethereum is immune from that same sort of thing, right? There's a lot of folks who were early in the Ethereum ICO days who sold at the top in 2021, or sold at the top in 2018, right? These exact same market cycles are sort of all wrapped up in this. And Joe Lubin like has sold a lot over the years, right? I don't think we should necessarily view selling as a problem, right? That is a basic dynamic of a healthy market. Um, I think it's also pretty crazy to say something like Chamath crashed the entire crypto market by selling some of his soul, right? I think that is like also a statement that is not really one you could really back up. But
Oh, I don't think
like,
he sold. I think he like round tripped it. But the fact that he was like threatening to do it, the fact that he
yeah,
potentially had that power, is not something that I'm comfortable with somebody having over a community. That look, like if there's a cash flow, it's different because yeah, sell it, somebody buy it, like you're getting like someone's going to exchange the cash flows. But if there's no cash flow, or the cash flows in 20 years, or I mean, I do want to ask you, like, how far out you think a potential profitable cash flow could come. But at that point, like you said in your tweet there, like monetary crypto is sort of a meme.
yes,
um
very much so.
right. So do you think like Bitcoin is nowhere near being sort of like a money, or what's your take on?
So let's start with the Ethereum is money crowd because I get like anthropologically why that came up, right? This is at a time when everyone's like, Ether is not a security, it's something. And there weren't enough lawyers in the room to say the word commodity. And instead, the community just sort of settled on this term money, right? And you'd see everyone from like Hasib at Dragonfly to, everyone else sort of repeat this idea that ETH is money. Well, how much stuff have you actually bought with ETH? What percentage of VCs investing in the Ethereum community distribute ETH versus USD, right? The idea that ETH is money is like very tenuous at best because A, it fluctuates by 70% in a year. That is not a good characteristic of money. That is not a stable long-term asset. Bitcoin is the same problem. Solana has the same problem. Tesla stock has the same problem. Netflix stock has the same problem, right? There's all of these different types of systems out there where if you look at them, they actually have very few characteristics of what money has. I think it's even tenuous to say gold is a money, right? I don't think we would look at gold in the existing, totally off blockchain world and say gold's money. We'd say gold is an intrinsic store of long-term value that is widely accepted by many people in many jurisdictions all around the world. So is oil, right? So are oil futures. Like there's lots of different systems out there that have durable value and high redemption across multiple jurisdictions. That is not a definition of money, though.
So I am a bit surprised to hear you say that gold is not money, because I would say that in most traditional circles, it's kind of considered base money in a
Are
form that
diamonds money? Is oil
um
money?
so oil has like the potential to back money. I would say I think
Sure,
there's
no doubt.
there's that potential. But
Yes.
it's not something that you can give somebody. I can't give you oil, right? Like I'm not gonna
Sure you
like
can.
carry it around, but I could give you a gold coin, and that's kind of
That's
what people have done for like thousands of years.
but that's only because of the weight of gold versus oil, right? Like are diamonds money then?
Uh,
Like
not
does
not
does
not
money have to be something you can put in a bag and physically hand to someone? In that case, like you know what I mean? Is like a lot of these things if you actually push them to what it means for something to be money, there's a few characteristics of it. I think we could probably say some form of global redemption and global acceptance across multiple
Yes.
jurisdictions falls into that category. And then
Yeah.
some form of stable or at least durable value, right? And that's where gold has done historically well. It doesn't go up much, doesn't go down much. It's roughly stable throughout the last, let's call it 200 years.
Yeah. What is it?
Okay.
What is your statement that gold is not money based on?
Uh, that it's not used to buy anything. It's not used as a form of currency. No one buys anything in gold, right?
Well, you could say
Even the
that,
libertarians who have bunkers
yeah,
don't buy it in gold.
that's true.
It's a
Not
durable
anymore.
store of value, right? Yeah, I mean, like maybe we're talking about since Bretton Woods, it's no longer money, right? I think obviously beforehand, when you had most currencies in the world based on a gold reserve that was a 1-to-1 backed system, sure, gold at that point is money. But we live in a world where gold is no longer money. It's just a incredibly durable commodity that's also highly liquid.
So your thesis is that money, in essence, is something that you're kind of not looking at the store value so much. You're looking at the means of transaction out of like those three sort of, you know, famous,
Right.
infamous categories of money.
Yeah. So here's, I guess, what I might say is the U.S. dollar money.
I would say it is.
So stamps are also money then, right? Stamps are legal
Um,
tender in the United States that all banks and all merchants technically have to accept.
I would say it probably is. Yeah, I don't know if it's good money, but it's a
Right.
form of money. Yeah,
But then our treasury's money.
treasury bonds, U.S. treasury bonds of the government.
Yes. Yeah.
Uh, I kind of see it as like staked ETH versus ETH. It's like is staked ETH. You can make it into ETH, so it's adjacent. It's money adjacent.
Yes. And this is kind of my argument is that like it's very hard to actually have an honest definition of money that includes Ethereum, Bitcoin, Solana, any cryptocurrency. I think you can call them money adjacent. You can see like how close is it to this thing being accepted as money. And Bitcoin's probably the closest. Um, and in some countries, like this is the thing that gets complicated here. In some jurisdictions, I think Bitcoin is functionally money, right? If you look at Venezuela, if you look at Turkey, if you look at Ukraine before, the invasion and war there, those were areas where there wasn't much belief and stability in the local currency. And so if you bought Bitcoin when it was $70,000, you're still massively up compared to the local currency in Venezuela or Turkey because those countries have such high inflation. But that's what I
Right.
mean by like the usage of money is very important to the definition of money. If something is not commonly accepted as tender within an economy, it is not money, right? It is something else. You could make an
So
argument that
yeah,
cigarettes in a
I
prison are money, right?
yeah, you kind of you do highlight effectively that the term money is used by different people in different ways and can mean different things and does not have enough clean definition. So let's avoid getting into the definitional game. Ultimately, we kind of see that there's two forms of things, right? One is what you've described as transacting right away. I want to buy something right now. What am I using to give somebody that thing is kind of like one way to look at money. The thing that I care about more, ethically, philosophically, is like what is the long term sort of value? What am I kind of working today so that like in 30 years my kids can go to college and use the work that I did back then sort of like as a store of work. And this is something that is important from an ethical standpoint because this is where all the theft happens, right? Like you have a fiat currency and then the president of Turkey builds himself some billion-dollar
Sure.
mansions, and like you just get hyperinflation, and then your kids are not going to college, they're going to like McDonald's. So this is kind of like a form of money, right? And when it comes to monetary premium, presumably this is kind of maybe where like the crux of our disagreement comes in. You might think that monetary premium is because of the transactional nature of like being able to freely, quickly transact in something. And maybe I see that the monetary premium is more, people assuming that over many years this will hold value.
Yeah, but like holding value over a long period of time is not a definition of money. Like I could show you a lot of New York real estate that holds value extremely well over a long period of time and actually increases in value. And I could argue that, a lot of these apartments, even in, the depths of COVID, were trading because there was so much demand for certain kinds of them. I think you could talk about like a Van Gogh probably falls into that same category, right? There are classes of things in this world that, whether it's because Russian oligarchs really want them and they see it as a good store of value or whatever the function of it is, they have the characteristics you're talking about, but we don't call them money.
If I can hijack the conversation a little bit here, like, do you think the crypto community, I mean, most of the crypto community, they hold Bitcoin Ether, and there's a tribalistic nature, right, where the
Yeah.
Ethereum community eventually wants to flip Bitcoin because they think it's better. And Justin, I put a link to a tweet here by Buffalo, who I think is the founder of Jito.
Yes.
Do you think there's an obsession like within the crypto community around like monetary premium, trying to be money? Do you think Solana is trying to be like a different type of a new asset? Like are you trying to create like a new paradigm? Like what is like
Yeah,
you're
there's
like the head of strategy at Solana. Like what is the strategy around value accrual for the soul of the
Yeah.
asset?
So what I would say is that it makes a lot of sense for people who hold a lot of a specific asset to advocate for that asset to go up in value. And I don't know if that's moneyness, but like that is effectively what we're talking about here, right? There's a group think in a lot of crypto communities that has decided X or Y or Z will make this thing implicitly more valuable in the long term, which I also want to say is very much not what money is. You don't hold money expecting it to go up in value.
Let's get away from the definitional stuff because maybe that is money for some. Like, you can go
It's
to the
not though.
dictionary
Like no
and
economist
well,
defines money that way, right? This is what I mean by like there's like the crypto's invented a bunch of ways of talking about stuff that don't actually reflect what these words mean to like economists, right?
yeah. First of all, like I would not respect many economists. Being an economist myself, it's not
Sure.
the I kind of look at the more practical rather than academic standpoint. Ultimately, you know, you can think from first principles, and
Yeah.
monetary concept is a social concept. It doesn't have anything to do with what the weight is, or can you put it in a bag or whatever, even like how much there is. Ultimately, it's an agreement between society that this is how we are counting the beans in terms of who can get who to do what. And
Yes.
I bring up this like heavy word of like slavery sometimes because that's the same as slavery. Like if you can tell somebody what to do, whether because they're starving and the only way they can get food is if you give them what society agrees is money, and then that's how they survive, or because like you're doing it by force. It's sort of the same thing in the sense like
Yes.
they're forced to do something that the person with the power says that they need to do, right? So um,
I agree with you on that.
if
Yes.
okay, great. So if for hundreds of thousands of years gold was that kind of role in society where pirates would go to a ship and take the gold, and then nobody would deny them the ability to use that gold to buy stuff because that was the socially accepted currency, right?
Yeah.
Now you could say the US dollar is obviously one of those.
Yes.
And Bitcoin is trying to create enough of a global acceptance as a macro asset, and ultimately a sort of form of gold, digital gold. That's obviously the meme, right? It's a little bit difficult if you don't consider gold to be money to then consider Bitcoin to be money, because I think it's even more of a stretch than gold is, because from a society standpoint, this is very new, right?
Yeah. And to be clear, I think gold's closer to being money than Bitcoin or Ether is. Um,
Yes.
but again, this is like well, we can move past the definitions here, but I think it's really important to know that money has to be accepted, right? Money has to be transacted as something other than a commodity, right? The modern version of this is, pirates seize a container ship and they sell off the assets of it. That doesn't suddenly make what's on a container ship gold any more than the pirate stealing gold does. It just means it's a highly liquid thing, right?
Don't you guys think this sort of debating the definition of money is some sort of obfuscation of like the question behind the question? Because I think the real question here is we have a thesis for why Bitcoin has value, why Ethereum has value. Those theses could be correct, they could be wrong. We can talk about that later,
Yeah.
but we're here to talk about Solana. So if we don't think
Yeah.
Solana's money, like what are we what are you buying? Where's the value coming from? Why is Solana, why should it be worth $1, a penny, $100, etc.? Maybe you
Totally.
can share your thoughts on that a bit.
Yeah, so I think the best way to think of Solana is similar to SaaS, right? In the early days of SaaS, the profit margins were astronomically lower than what Oracle was making or IBM was making or any of those companies at the time. But the TAM for SaaS was 1,000 times larger than what Oracle could ever hope to sell with their $20 million a year contracts. And so Solana is a long-term bet that blockchain technology is going to underpin a lot more of the internet and of our daily lives and of our financial world than we do today. And if that's the case, right, if you start to get a world where you have 20 million people transacting on Solana every day, what these economics that look like there may be a problem today look very different when you have a huge amount of daily active transactions and daily active users. And the flip side of that, I would say, is that if you look at what's happened with Ethereum, it's economically unusable today with a infinitesimally small user base, right? The optimization to go for deflationary fee-based systems this early in the adoption cycle, I think is potentially a problem that the Ethereum community has to work through around long term. If we're not increasing the data availability layer, how are we actually going to make sure that this stuff is usable? Because L2s are already in the dollar to several dollar gas fees during periods of high usage.
Right. I mean, I don't know if that's a fair argument, because the type of use cases that potentially, Ethereum and that secure settlement layer is maybe going after, like you said, the average user, maybe it's richer, or maybe it's just the same users, but they're using Ethereum for, you know, securing high value, um, dollars and using DeFi protocols. And maybe Solana is for, coordinating a global Wi-Fi distribution system, or, the kind of stuff that we've seen tried on this like very low fee setup. It's not to say that it's unusable or whatever, because maybe, I only need to do like 2 transactions a week, and that's still enough gas if everybody's doing it. But it's just a different use
Yeah,
case, right?
but on a global level, what we see just historically rolling back the clock on any piece of technology is lower fees and higher scalability gets adoption, right? And this is not to say that wire transfers are not used anymore. This is not to say that Oracle has gone out of business. Oracle is still a company that exists. They still have a stock that's performed pretty well. AWS has eaten their lunch, right? And this is not to say this is going to happen here too. But, you can see things like Venmo or, quite frankly, blockchain are really reducing wire transfers, except in a certain type of setting. Even Western Union, right, and MoneyGram and these folks have totally changed the when TransferWise, have changed how international transfers occur. Blockchain is also that level of disruption to these systems. And so this is not to say there isn't a great future for Ethereum. I think there is. I think it's very hard to look at a lot of the world's population and say, oh, like Ethereum is going to be a usable platform for folks here. But who knows? It might be, right? There's a lot of work that could be done to change this sort of drive for monetary focused value accrual into a drive for usability on the network.
Can I ask a question on that?
Yeah.
If, let's say, in 5 years, we're in this hypothetical future where the tech has really developed well, let's just say in the Ethereum ecosystem, and some L2 or some scaling solution, maybe we haven't thought of it, maybe it is a ZK, gets us to the point where transaction fees are negligible or almost at the cost of Solana. Is there still a need for a Solana in that case, or not? And I guess if the answer is no, are you sort of bearish that Ethereum could get to this level of scaling needed to match Solana?
So Ethereum had this on the roadmap, right? I worked in the Ethereum ecosystem in 2020 and 2019 when they were talking about ETH2 as being a scaling endeavor as opposed to something else. And it became something else, right? And so the idea now is we're going to keep Ethereum at the same amount of capacity it had before, and we're going to add a bunch of layer 2s and layer 3s and layer 47s on top of it, and we're going to create a really long nested
Bit of a
system.
stretch.
Well, it's not, right? If you follow the way people talk about this, like L2s are at most today 75 transactions per second. If you really want to get up to really high transaction counts that are capable of supporting something like the stock exchange or Twitter, right, or something like that, you're going to need a huge number of layers involved in that system unless you radically scale the base layer, right? And so this isn't to say that Ethereum couldn't do it, but culturally today, the folks who are in decision-making authority in the Ethereum community, and that's not to say it's centralized, there's many folks involved in making these decisions, but their focus is on driving value, which is not something I'm going to condemn them for, but I think it's at odds with the idea that we're going to scale this to be a global platform.
I think both me and Justin agree with that take. Actually, if anyone, I think our listeners have watched our recent episodes. We have we had a little Batman with the Buddha belly, and we're talking about how Ethereum is trying to be money and also trying to be usable, and those two things are clashing. And I've spoken at this at length before, and I fully agree with the fact that there's a bit of an identity issue right now, and I think JMO had some good points about that as well. But I will counteract a lot of the other things you said, because you're starting to sound like this thesis of like Christix and A16Z last cycle, where blocks, there's not enough block space. There's not enough block space. It's the most biggest commodity. We need more block space. And now we have like shit ton of block space. Like no one's using it. I think the use cases of all this block space are not fleshed out. And even hearing Anatoly talk about it, he's like, well, maybe in a lot of years we'll see like some use cases.
So even if you strip out votes on Solana, right, you just look at user transactions on the network, that steady state of transactions is more than all L2s combined and the Ethereum mainnet per second.
But that's not
right?
that's not a intellectually honest
How
thing
is
to
that
look
not
at.
an
Like,
intellectually honest argument?
because like if I can say like, yeah, I'm willing to spend $10 on Solana, and I'm willing to spend $100 on gas on Ethereum, and like if I'm willing to spend $10, yeah, I'll just spam. Like if I'm a bot,
But no
like
one's just spamming, right? Like
look at it this way. Like if it's like there's MEV to pick up that's worth $100, and I'm willing to spend $90 to pick it up. And this is
yeah.
Potentially true for any chain. That $90 as a number of transactions could be like quadrillion transactions, and then you're like, look, we're getting quadrillion transactions. It doesn't necessarily like reflect on anything, right?
I actually would not agree with that. I think if you actually look at the MEV opportunities on Solana, they're more than they are on Ethereum because of the gas fees on Ethereum today. But I think the actual problem we're getting at is everyone prefers to transact on the Ethereum L1 than transacting on an L2.
My point, just to make it clear, so like let's say when CL was trying to go to Frentech and kind of edge the bots there on Frentech, we had the biggest number of transactions, like it was like, I guess on base, just like a huge number of transactions, and somebody could say like, look, adoption, like base is getting more than all the other L2s combined, and it's because it's cheap, and like there's like an MEV opportunity. It's not really reflecting like a real
sorry,
use
I wasn't
case.
I wasn't making a user base argument. What I was saying is when you get like a core thesis of technology, which is true back to the 1940s when we first started building computers, is every time you make something cheaper by an order of magnitude, you get an entirely new class of entrepreneur building on that system and building totally different types of applications than you ever would have seen before, right? And so this is not to say that a Solana is going to steal all the existing use cases for Ethereum. I think that's not at all what we've seen. And what we actually see in our developer numbers is most developers on Solana did not start on Ethereum, right? They chose Solana as the first network they're building on, or maybe they were part of the Bitcoin community early on, but they are not coming from Ethereum, right? There's this sort of idea that like there's this big migration of devs from Ethereum to Solana or something like that, and that's actually not what's happening. We're seeing net new developers come into the ecosystem. But the transition from something like 3G to 4G technology changed the entire revolution of what was possible to build in the mobile space. That didn't displace fixed landline internet connections. It added an entirely new use case and new category. And that's sort of, I think, the thing that I think is really important here, is that we're looking at transactions that are disruptively cheap compared to what you can get in other networks and have much higher throughput and much faster finality. That is going to mean a different type of product is built on Solana than is built on Ethereum. That's not
And like
bearish
how long
on
do you think
Ethereum.
it's going to be until we see those products? Or
We have them already.
I mean, something that is like meaningful for like economic world activity. Like, is there something already that kind of seems like that?
Um, I mean, can you say a little bit more about the kind of thing you'd be looking for?
So something that, you know, that scale is really needed. I think Anatoly's kind of optimistic that in the future, in many years, we will see those things. You seem to be saying that they're already here, but I don't know that anything. Is there something that is, let's say, superior to Web 2 that we need on Web 3 that needs all this block space to be cheap, that has a meaningful economic impact today?
I mean, I think there's nothing in blockchain that has a global level meaningful economic impact today, to be fair. But I think if we look at the kinds of things where you could see that coming from, the decentralized physical infrastructure space is very interesting to that effect. I think you can also look at groups like Sling and uses of USDC and other international stablecoins that are genuinely cheaper than using Web2 payment rails to send money abroad. And that's a very interesting component for this too. But look, I think as an industry, we have less than 1% of the world using blockchain. Like we are still so early on all of these use cases in general right now that it's hard to say anything in crypto has had a world level economic impact.
Yeah, so it seems like the bull case for Solana is that at some point, like it's a very forward looking bet, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Once we get
look,
more
the
users,
bear case. Let me give you the bear case for Solana. We don't need more block space. The bear case for Solana is that blockchain never really catches on to the extent where we need more block space and we need fast finality and we need a high number of transactions and we need low fees. It's entirely theoretically possible that that is just not something that the industry ever needs. And there isn't real mass adoption ever. And, we don't see things like social networks built on blockchain. We don't see things like payment networks built on blockchain. We don't see payroll moving over. We don't see, all the ideas of gaming on blockchain. They all fail, right? I think that the bear case for Solana is basically that crypto also fails in its adoption play. And in that
What
world,
percentage do you put on that world? Like,
pretty
if you
low.
had to put a probability on it.
I mean, I think if that actually happens and we fast forward 5 to 7 years and fundamentally the size of the crypto market is twice what it is today, as an industry we failed. Right? And that would be, if your vision for the future is that crypto is going to be about this size forever, that's a reason to be bearish on Solana.
When you say size, do you mean market cap or do you mean users, or what exactly do you mean? Because those things can
Users,
be completely different.
transactions, real world use cases.
Okay.
Right?
Because it's
Like,
entirely possible that like a monetary story does emerge for, let's say, Bitcoin, and then the market's massive. But yeah, like none of those things that you
right.
mentioned of like Web 2 transitions happen.
Yeah, it's also possible that Bitcoin is the only thing that survives, right? That the monetary properties of Bitcoin and that proof of, like, in a world where we're maximizing for monetary utility, proof of work is a genius, beautiful system that blows proof of stake out of the water, right? If what we're focusing on is usability and smart contracts and the ability to actually have this stuff support millions of concurrent users, right? Like you need systems that are not Bitcoin for that. And proof of work is a really bad system for those sorts of use cases. But, Bitcoin has this like cockroach ability where even when you knock off 60% of the miners, like due to a change in policy in China, the blocks get super slow for 2 days. They slowly recover, right? It is a very resilient system that has, the characteristics that if monetary store of value is the only use case for crypto that lasts long term, yeah, that you could see Bitcoin as being the only thing that survives.
I do appreciate the economic honesty.
We've talked about this, over a few episodes where Bitcoin is very clearly one thing. We all know what that is. We don't have to get into it. Ethereum is sort of in this, like, what would be considered like the deadly middle ground where it's not really that scalable and it's not perfectly money. It's in this middle. Solana goes completely to one end of that. I think we can all agree on that. We're obviously trying to scale as much as possible at the base layer. But as we've discussed, like not these clear money or financial properties yet, could be in the future. You're competing in that space, and it seems to me that there's quite a lot of other chains competing in that space that frankly don't know too much about, but I assume you know more than me, like Aptos, Sui, Near, several others, right?
Yeah.
Monad.
Yeah.
Whatever that is, right? So in this world where there's like a lot of people competing for these like commodity, a very cheap, very low value block space. I don't mean that in a disparaging way.
Yeah.
How does a chain differentiate, right? Because I think it's clear that Bitcoin differentiates. Ethereum is going its own way. We'll see if that works. But if everyone's just fighting for this cheap commoditized block space, what makes Solana different from any other chain that tries to do the same thing?
Yeah, so there's a few things. Today, there really is no chain that has the performance characteristics of Solana. Aptos and Sui are both pretty new, but their transactions per second are, 100 or less, right? When you're looking at those sorts of things. And the other piece too is Solana is one global state, the same way Ethereum, the Ethereum L1 is one global state. And that makes it, there's a ton of things you can do in one global state that you cannot do with sharded ecosystems or multi-layer ecosystems. And so that is another really big differentiating point. I think a good analogy here is looking at what like TSMC has done. So Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Corporation. There's no fab or foundry in the world that can compete with TSMC because for 20 years they've been pumping basically all of their profits into making technology better. And for Solana, this is FireDancer, right? This is a new validator client that's anywhere between 10 to 100 times faster than the current version of Solana. It's probably a year or so out. It just hit testnet, right? And so that is just a very different vision of how you actually hit success here. And I think your sort of two ends of the spectrum thing is completely correct. Solana, Tolly has said before, over the long term, the cost of a Solana transaction should be as close to the cost of running that computer as possible. And the fees come from other places. They come from stake-weighted QoS. They come from priority fees for writing to certain pieces of state. And so Solana, is sort of all in on that thesis of massive scalability and see what people build on top of it.
So, like, I'm curious, like, what is the defensibility of IP in this space? Because you mentioned, Taiwan, computer chips, like all this stuff. There's a
Yeah.
lot of special sauce that goes into these things, and as Justin alluded, there's a if like Ethereum was V1 and then the smart contract and Solana was V2, we're seeing like the next, like the third gen, and maybe like the third gen will not be successful. Maybe this will be like DeFi 2.0, which fell flat on its face. But like potentially Monad, Justin, we're gonna get Keone on pretty soon, so you can learn about what that is. But regardless, there are other very smart people and teams that will not even just now, like into the next 10 years, continue to try to build a better version. So are
Oh,
we
yeah.
kind of basically betting that like the team and the current path and the technology path is like going to be superior long term
So
over like
so the other piece here that's important is Solana is the first parallel blockchain that doesn't involve sharding to achieve parallelability, right? EVM is aggressively sequential. Every transaction takes a global write lock. And look, the folks at Monad are doing incredible work. I think it's the most interesting thing to happen to the EVM in, 6 years, basically since the EVM was invented, right? They're the first people who have actually tried to scale the EVM in a way that is meaningful and difficult and not just marketing. I think it's really interesting to see what they're building. One of the things that's challenging about scaling the EVM out to 10,000 or 20,000 or 100,000 transactions per second is transactions are non-deterministic on EVM. So there are some key architectural differences that have been made in how Solana is constructed that's designed for long-term scalability. So, for example, before a transaction executes on Solana, it has to specify the accounts in the state that it wants to talk to. And so only those accounts and only that state, there's a write lock taken out on. On EVM, a transaction actually can go any which way once you start computing it. This is why wallet drainers are such a problem in EVM, and they're less of a problem in the Solana ecosystem, because you don't necessarily know what all of the interactions that a transaction is going to touch when it executes an EVM. There's some really powerful advantages of that, but there's also some disadvantages. And one of those disadvantages is it's very hard to parallelize. So, Monad has a certain amount of overhead because they have to do stochastic analysis of what is this transaction likely to do. And then they need reserved compute capacity to actually correct that if that ends up not being the case. And Keone and the guys over there are incredibly smart. I've been watching what they're doing, and it's really cool to see. But this is a thing where there are limits to what different types of VMs can support over the long term. But all the work that the Solana Foundation does and people building on Solana is open source. We hope it makes every blockchain better the same way that the work being done on Ethereum makes Solana better, right? That every blockchain owes a huge debt to Bitcoin and also owes a huge debt to Ethereum for creating this whole concept of smart contracts.
You mentioned the Solana Foundation, and I wanted to ask just a little bit about centralization,
Yeah.
securities laws, etc. So I sort of take my own approach where I think intuitively, like, is this an investment somewhat like a security? For me, I actually think Ethereum is somewhat like a security. We've talked about this before. Very small amount of developers actually decide what happens to the Ethereum chain. People like us that are quite big stakeholders don't have much of a say. And there is this centralized component. And to me, that makes it a security. I don't think it should be regulated by the SEC. I think it's something different. But I think if we can make that case for Ethereum, we can make that case even more so for Solana. I think Solana would be in the blockchain would be in much worse shape if the Solana Foundation disappeared as opposed to the Ethereum Foundation. So I'm curious, like, what are your thoughts there? Is how is Solana not a security? We can skip that question if you want to, and then where does Solana go without the Solana Foundation? Is there still going to be development on the blockchain if something happened tomorrow?
Yeah, the short answer is yes, right? The team building Fire Dancer is totally independent from the Solana Foundation. They have their own monetary incentives to create a validator client for the Solana network. And so I think there would be the production of cool, awesome software for the Solana network would absolutely continue. The Solana Foundation is an important part of the Solana ecosystem. It's not to say there would be no effect if it went away. The same way there would certainly be an effect if the Ethereum Foundation went away. But Ethereum would certainly survive that, and I think Solana would too.
But you have to recognize, like, of course, these teams are somewhat disconnected, but there's a ton of coordination that happens behind the scenes. Like, I'm not just picking
Yeah.
on Solana here. I've said the same about Ethereum. The Terra docs or the Terra legal docs that came out are really interesting in that we saw these validator group chats where all the validators are actually just sort of like coming together to decide on something in what fits
Yeah.
their interest. And I mean, it's not as simple as saying these are independent teams doing their own thing. Like,
Justin, like stop. Like as a high frequency trader, this is like the first time with like Fire Dancer and all this stuff that all these like brains in my industry are actually trying to do something apart from cutting 1 nanosecond and like trying to beat the other guy. So I'm actually
Yeah.
happy that Jump is doing all that stuff.
Yeah. Also, like, check out their talks from Breakpoint. Like, they figured out a way to do ED25519 acceleration that is twice as fast as anyone else in the industry. That is not a Solana-specific innovation. Lots of blockchains use math. This will benefit everyone in the space, right? So I think the cool part here is that, like, I think we've had a lot of, like, B-quality folks operating in crypto for a very long time because the industry hasn't been taken particularly seriously. And there are some incredible minds, right? Vitalik, Anatoly, fill in the blank. There's lots of incredible folks who believe in blockchain. But the average blockchain developer is not as good as the average high-frequency trader developer, right? I think that's not a
This is
controversial
true.
statement. Or the average
This
embedded
is
systems engineer at Qualcomm, right?
yeah. No, this is a great point.
Yeah. And these are huge boosts to the entire ecosystem to get these folks involved. I do want to go back, Justin, to one thing you were saying, which is I'm not sure that coordination is the same thing as centralization. I think if you look at something like the Linux Foundation and the way Linux works, there are a group of people who are very closely aligned, apart from the University of Michigan, in terms of what should actually go into the Linux kernel and how that development should be done. And it's done by people all around the world. I mean, CERN operates in the same way. The entire academic particle physics community is a diverse set of stakeholders, a diverse set of funding, but they're all working towards sort of a common goal. And I think that's kind of the end state vision for blockchain. I don't see a world where the average person is voting on governance decisions and EIP proposals and that sort of thing, because I think the average person is not qualified and doesn't really know what's going on. I do think that there is some bag alignment within all blockchain governance today that we have to sort of figure out a way to address. To go back full circle, I think that that's sort of the group that captured Bitcoin back in the block size debates, and there's a little bit of that influence in Ethereum to sort of push it to be value accruing at the expense of scale. But these are natural forces in any sort of group of humans trying to figure out what to do. And this is why I think the biggest problems in blockchain over the next 5 years are not technical. They're all human.
I think like Austin, I think the stance you're taking is that crypto as money is a meme, and you're basically saying that Solana shouldn't be money. It's not a money. If someone is buying Solana, like what kind of bet is it? Is it kind of this bet on the future, this utopian future, where so many things like run on blockchain rails? Do you think it's kind of like a Schelling point for communities to form, saying, "Hey, like I own Solana, you own Solana, let's build on Solana." Do you kind of view it as like a Tesla-like asset, just because you
Yeah.
know Tesla has like a crazy premium, doesn't generate, cash, or it doesn't like really pay dividends. Do you think it's like what kind of asset is Solana trying to be?
Yeah, so I think there's one important characteristic of the Solana network that I don't think any other blockchains have, but correct me if I'm wrong here, which is stake-weighted QoS, which is basically a system where if there's contention for a piece of state, Solana has local fee markets, not global fee markets. So what that means is there's a really hot NFT mint or something along those lines, fees can spike just for that NFT mint because that is a serial transaction, right? If you're trying to write to the same piece of state, that has to go sequentially. And stake-weighted QoS is a way of basically prioritizing transactions to land, where if they're sent from a validator that has stake, that is weighted higher than a transaction sent from a validator without stake. So there is a world long term where, the same way that high frequency trading firms pay a bunch of money to get faster data from stock exchanges, that, a whole bunch of business and corporate actors own Sol simply so they can stake to a validator so they can provide a certain amount of access to the network during periods where there might be something that's like state specific that's contested, like an arbitrage, for example, or something along those lines. But I think in a more broad sense, you're buying a share of a global computer. I mean, share like a security, but like you're buying time on the global state machine that is Solana. You're buying the ability to send transactions over the long term, and you're believing that that is going to be valuable, right? That the inflation rate on Solana diminishes at about 1.5 percentage points per year down to a steady state of 1.5%, which is the same inflation rate that Ethereum has. And this is sort of that long-term bet. I think it's very fair to look at the Solana ecosystem and go, this is a few years behind. Look at the Solana ecosystem and say this is a few years behind Ethereum. The Ethereum tooling is better than the tooling on Solana, right? The average Ethereum dev has been through one more bear market than the average Solana dev, right? But if you're looking at it as a future bet on that thesis that one global state is going to be a really attractive place to build applications.
Austin, so is someone that missed out on Solana when it was $2, when it was at $12 in this recent bear market, how should I personally be thinking about what a good value is for me, right? And as someone that would be interested in buying Sol, like what makes it attractive now at say $60 versus even more attractive at 20 or at
Yeah.
300? What are you looking at personally, and what should I be tracking?
So unfortunately, the lawyers at the Solana Foundation will certainly not let me say anything about this. What I can say, though, is I genuinely do not know what drives price in this market. It does not make any sense to me
How do you
that
feel when you see
BNB.
like, because you're talking about this as like,
Yeah.
if you want to secure your future ability to use Solana in 10 years when all this cool stuff might happen, you might want to buy some now so you secure it. But what we're actually seeing is, apes, whatever, good apes, whatever, I don't know, they're putting in like 50% of their net worth on this kind of thing and leveraging long on bonk and like all this other stuff. Do you just ignore it? Do you see that as like people gonna be people, like this kind of thing? How do you like mentally, because you're a very serious guy, you have a serious role, but you know that this matters a lot.
Oh, of course. And just to be clear, I'm not suggesting anyone should buy Solana so they can use it in 10 years. I think the lawyers would also be unhappy with that sort of a statement. But like at its core, we see people building things and trying stuff out on all of these networks. I think it's hard to look at ApeCoin and say it made sense to spend $3,500 in gas fee to claim that airdrop, or the crash we've seen in Friendtech, right? Like that these things are actually like sustainable long term, whatever. Like in some level, there's a lot of tulip trading on blockchain, right? And eventually the Dutch tulip market collapses, but that doesn't mean that the underlying network or the underlying technology sort of falls into that category. To use a pretty crude analogy, the collapse of Enron did not prove that deregulated energy markets were a bad idea. It proved that Enron was a bad idea, right? And so I think some of this is just enough monkeys on enough typewriters are eventually going to figure out like what are absolute killer use cases for all of these platforms and all of this tech. And that's awesome to see. But like, it's sort of like the Wild West in the early days of like the oil markets, right? You would see these incredible boom and bust cycles of refineries, of everyone in that space, let alone like classic good old fashioned gold mining and gold rushes. Like a lot of the dynamics we are seeing today are very classic dynamics of markets that still just need 5 or 10 years to mature.
I mean, I fully agree with that part. We're at this Wild West stage where people don't realize what they're doing. Just like my final point, and we can kind of go to our last segment, but as my closing kind of argument, I will say that yes, like this is sort of like a situation where Solana, not just Solana, a lot of these L1 and other tokens become like tulips, like you described, where people just start speculating like crazy on them. Um, and I understand, you have a legal position, all this stuff, and totally is like an amazing guy, technologist, etc. But ignoring the fact that this is game is going on, this tulip game, I think sociologically, anthropologically, is very important. What's happening? It's not just like a
Yeah.
random tulip thing. I think it's people trying to organize community money, as I've coined it. People are trying to build communities, find like-minded individuals around the world, and have this like asset that they try to get rich together and congregate together. Now that's happening outside of, like you said, all the technology, all the amazing stuff that's being built, and that's true. They are separate, but that game is going on, and
Yeah.
there's two issues. One, the technology I see is like validation when the apes go crazy. Like the apes might be like playing their games and short squeezing people, and they're like, "Oh, look, we told you the technology is good. It got 3 times better this month." Right.
Right. But this is what I mean by like I don't know what makes these markets like genuinely I don't know what makes these markets move. Was ETH 95% worse when it went from $1,200 to $80? Was Solana when it was $260 whatever math that is times a better network than it is today? No, the Solana network is probably 20 times stronger today than it was in November of 2021. Right?
Right.
There's more
Exactly.
developers, there's more senior developers, there's way more ecosystem adoption. The technology is way further forwards than it was before. Traders are going to be traders, right? And they're going to do whatever they do. I think the real test for any of these is how many serious engineers are actually building on these systems. Ethereum is a lot of really serious folks building on it. Solana does too. And for me, that is the best indication of how likely a network is to continue to be relevant into the future. Now, if that means the global crypto market is $100 million or $100 trillion, right? Make your own bets and figure out your own assumptions and whatever, do your own research on that. But it is these networks that have very serious computer science folks working on them that are most likely to continue existing into the future and are most likely, I think, to find breakout use cases, to find mass adoption, to find all of these things that we're all kind of looking for in this industry. I
Yeah.
think we
Totally.
always underestimate what's possible in 5 years, and we massively overestimate what's possible in 2 years.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think we're very appreciative that you came on. I'm glad to hear Soul is not trying to be money; it's trying to actually accrue value in the long term. And um, I think, I am personally very interested in the discussion of what all these people are doing, and I don't just see them as traders.
Yeah,
I think it's like, traders are a subsection, but there's a lot of other people that participate that have normal jobs. They're not, professional traders, and we will continue to discuss this into the future with different episodes as we do this. But I love that you came on and were willing to give your perspective on this.
yeah.
Um,
Thanks for the invite. This is a lot of fun. Really appreciate you guys taking the time and also taking the brain space to kind of dig in on these topics.
Absolutely. We're not done yet. We have one more segment, Austin,
All
and
right.
hopefully you can join us on it.
Yeah.
So we have the pasta of the week segment.
Love it.
We each kind of saw something maybe that we want to quote. Maybe Taiki, you want to kick off?
Yeah, sure. So I want to talk about the Certic tweet that I think is a little relevant to today's topic around the Solana phone just having a backdoor, and they have like this 1 minute video.
Yeah.
And then do you want to pull up the other VE horny tweet? I can't believe I just said VE horny, but I feel like it's kind of like this meme where everything that Certic touches just turns into a pile of shit. I mean, I respect auditors and whatnot, but do you kind of want to give a rebuttal on like what happened here?
Yeah, let me start off by saying auditors are the most important people in this entire crypto ecosystem. They charge a lot of money. They charge a lot of money for a reason. Most audit firms are great. Get recommendations from your friends. Please get your code audited. I don't know what was going on with this tweet they put out. They basically showed that if you can break the bootloader on an Android phone, that you can compromise a Bitcoin wallet, which, sure, right? Like, to me, this was sort of something that doesn't really make any sense, and there was no action necessary, right? There's no bug report that they filed with us that said, hey, we'd found this problem in the Solana mobile stack. Like, here, we're submitting a bug report for it. This is the basic thing of if you have physical access to a computer, a hacker can always do something. And this is why, air-gapped signing can be really important for some folks. Keeping your ledger physically secure somewhere is also important. There's nothing in this video that had anything to do with the Solana phone. It just had to do with an Android phone. And the same thing is, of course, possible on an iOS phone.
Is your Solana phone your daily driver?
No, it's not. I am very much stuck on iMessage lock-in.
Same.
Yeah.
Justin, do you
That was
want
my
to share pasta?
Absolutely. I tried to pick something that was on topic today. So I we've been talking a lot about the value accrual to Sol, the value accrual to ETH. If Sol is just this like commodity, where's the value going to accrue? We talked a lot about that. I think Austin made some awesome points, but Evan, who shout out to Evan, huge super fan of the show, tweeted out this fundamentals meme. And this is also what we talked about at the end of the show is like where the fundamentals fit in. Sadly, they don't really fit in anywhere at this point, and coins go up for a number of reasons, usually narrative and mimetic based. But that's my pasta of the week.
Yeah.
I love the response there. There's like a response by MIDI. It's even better. Where Solana is going,
I didn't see that.
It doesn't need fundamentals. This is like a little Suzu copy pasta there on. You won't need charts, but I love that.
That's awesome.
Oh, and there's a whoa! Is that your alt account, Austin? Is that your alt account?
That is not my alt account. I said layer 37s, I will have you know. I don't think we need 42 layers, just 37.
This is very good. I'll share my pasta. So CryptoLin made a very good point in this tweet. I love the picture as well, but this was epic. So if we're gonna win the fight against TradFi, I'll say this at least properly, they need to underestimate us. And we need to act stupid, and everyone's doing a really good job of that. I think the price action in a lot of random tokens that we're seeing over the last few weeks, even though it's great to see the activity back. Yeah, it's not gonna make people take us more seriously, and hopefully that'll give us a bit more of some time to keep building the inside the Trojan horse, while the senators are thinking that we're just doing stupid stuff, which we are doing. We are doing stupid stuff. How about you, Austin? Did you have anything that you kind of caught your eye this week?
Yeah, there was a great tweet a few days ago from the Stalwart account. I think you guys can probably pull this up here too. The tweet reads, "Stocks are surging. Rumors of an S&P 500 ETF." Just this is the core of the best part of crypto Twitter. There's so many bad parts of crypto Twitter, but just these dumb insider jokes that are both making fun of ourselves and making fun of the existing economic system. This is what does it for me.
I mean, I'm sure
Is
you're starting to get
there?
asked like, when is the Solana ETF?
I was just about to ask. I was going to say, is there a Solana BlackRock ETF in the works? I know
Ask
you can't
BlackRock.
say anything.
Genuinely, they don't. It's not like they'd give us a heads up on this sort of thing.
They bought
anyway.
it $12. That's what drove the price all the way up to 60.
All right. Well, I think everybody had amazing pastas this week. The quality was very high. I think Justin's has to win just because the responses kind of just keep upping the level. So that whole
Wow.
thread was epic. So Justin, you're the pasta of the week winner.
I'm
I
honored.
think it's been
17 episodes. I think this is my first win ever.
I think
So
it's the
Austin, you're
first
my
one.
lucky charm.
There you
We'll
go.
have to bring you back in a year when Solana's killing it and doing amazingly as well.
Yeah, when Fire Dancer's
All
out.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for the amazing episode, Austin. Again,
Thank
much
you.
love. Thank you for coming on, and hope to chat again.
Great.